Grace O'Mahony, Ireland's legendary pirate queen, beautiful, fearless, and brave enough to rescue her son from the English landowners. I've always felt a strange, magnetic pull toward the west coast of Ireland. There's something about the cliffs of Clew Bay, the abandoned castles scattered like forgotten memories, the smell of salt and seaweed clinging to the wind, that makes you feel both small and infinite at the same time. And it was in that wild, rugged place, over 400 years ago, that a woman sailed into legend. Her name was Grace O'Mahony, or Grania Ní Máille if you want to speak her language, the way she herself would have signed it, with fire and authority. But don't let the polite way of saying her name fool you. Grace was not gentle. She was a pirate, a red-haired warrior whose beauty and power were whispered about from Mayo to Galway, whose laughter could cut through the roar of the Atlantic, and whose gaze alone could command men in fleets. Great pints of beer to be had in the local pubs, I can testify to that. I'll be honest, when I first read about her, I didn't just admire her, I felt something personal stir inside me. Her son, Murach, my name by the way, was taken from her by the English landowners in Ireland, and suddenly history wasn't just distant, it was intimate. I could see the worry in her eyes, feel her panic, understand the fire in her veins, because it mirrored something I've carried in my own life, the need to protect the ones we love, the raw, unyielding instinct to fight for them no matter the cost. Grace was born around 1530, in a time when women were expected to stay behind hearths and doors, but she, my God, she never stayed put. She was the daughter of the O'Mahony clan, a family whose lives were stitched into the tides, whose wealth was counted in ships, men, and command of the Atlantic. From her earliest days, she learned what few women did then: how to sail, how to fight, how to rule. I imagine her standing on the deck of a small galley as a child, wind tearing her red hair across her face, her small hands gripping ropes, her eyes as bright as the morning sun reflecting off the waves. And even then, I can feel the certainty she must have had, that her destiny wasn't behind a door, it was in the sea itself. By the time she was 15, Grace married Donal O'Cogie O'Flaherty, heir to the O'Flahertys of Connemara, uniting two maritime powers. Their wedding would not have been quiet or demure. I imagine drums, the smell of roasted meat, the tang of sea air mixing with smoke from torches lining the harbour. And soon after, they had 3 children, Owen, Murach, and Margaret. Murach, I think about him constantly, the son who would one day be taken from her, who would test the limits of her courage, her cunning, her love. By the way, these are the castles of the existing castles she owned, and you can still see them today if you like, 400 years later, not a problem. Rockfleet Castle, located near Newport, Clare Island Castle, Clare Island, Kildavnet Castle, Achill and the mainland, Belclare Castle, Westport. Life, though, has a way of complicating even the strongest hearts. Donal was killed in a violent dispute. I don't imagine Grace wept for long, not in the way the world might expect. She took command of his fleet, reclaimed his strongholds, and returned to Clare Island, her ancestral lands. I can almost hear her muttering to herself, the Atlantic wind carrying her words. "We had a good crack today, boys, but tomorrow we take what's ours." That's the thing about Grace. She didn't just survive, she thrived. She made Clare Island her base and later Rockfleet Castle her fortress, the kind of place that seems abandoned now, but was once a hive of strategy, laughter, and the roar of men preparing to defend her queen. Ships that refused to pay tolls were seized. Captains who dared lie were taught lessons that travelled as whispers along the coast. And she did all this while keeping her red hair blazing in the wind, her beauty a weapon just as sharp as any sword or musket. Men spoke of her like the Atlantic itself, impossible to control, beautiful, dangerous, and she was, I confess, the kind of woman who could make you love her and fear her in the same breath. Grace married again, Richard the Iron Burke, chief of Lower Mayo. The marriage lasted a year and a day, enough under. But life would not let her rest, not for long. The English had grown tired of a woman ruling fleets, commanding islands and enforcing tolls on the Atlantic like a queen born to it. Sir Richard Bingham burned her lands, seized her ships and imprisoned her sons. Owen was murdered in custody, a cruel, unnecessary act meant to break her heart. But it was Murroch, my Murroch, whose capture made her cross oceans in defiance. And in that moment, reading the accounts of what she did, I felt my chest tighten. I could see her pacing Rockfleet Castle, the firelight flickering across her face, her hands shaking with rage and fear and love, thinking, I will not lose him, not to them, not to anyone. She did the unthinkable. Grace gathered her remaining ships, rallied her men, and sailed to London in 1593. She crossed dangerous waters with nothing but courage, conviction, and a mother's love as her compass. I like to imagine the look on her sailors' faces as she stood at the prow of the ship, wind tearing through her red hair, eyes blazing with fury and determination. Hold fast, lads, she would have said. We ride for my son, and we ride for the sea itself. And then she faced Queen Elizabeth I. I'll tell you, try to picture it. A woman in her 60s, a pirate queen whose red hair was still like fire, standing in the heart of England, refusing to bow, refusing to apologise, demanding the release of her son. She was eloquent, witty, sharp, an Atlantic storm personified. Elizabeth listened, and in a rare gesture of respect, she ordered Murroch's release, rebuked Bingham, and allowed Grace's lands to be partially restored. Can you imagine the pride, the relief, the sheer joy as she sailed back to Ireland, her son alive at her side, the Atlantic welcoming them back like an old friend? Returning home, Grace's triumph was palpable. Clare Island and Rockfleet Castle welcomed her as if nothing had changed, even though everything had. Murroch, scarred by captivity but alive, learned from his mother the meaning of courage, strategy and loyalty. Tibbet na Long thrived, Margaret married into power, and Grace's influence over the west coast of Ireland remained unchallenged. I like to imagine her standing on Rockfleet's battlements, red hair whipping in the wind, saying, "We had a good crack today, Murroch, and tomorrow the sea calls again." By the way, there must be a Hollywood movie in this. Her life was not just about piracy, although that is what history remembers. It was about family, love and resilience. Every raid she carried out, every ship seized, every toll collected was part of a greater plan to secure her children's future. Murroch's rescue was the heart of that plan, a mother's devotion played out across oceans and courts, against armies and monarchs alike. I often find myself walking along the cliffs of Clew Bay, imagining the Atlantic spray hitting my face, thinking about Grace. The abandoned castles, the old Irish houses along the coast, the wind-whipped stones of Rockfleet, they all tell her story if you know how to listen. You can hear her laughter, sharp and joyful, commanding men, rallying her sons, reminding everyone that the sea is not conquered, it is respected. I confess there are days when I feel vulnerable reading her story, imagining the heartbreak of losing a child and the courage it must take to face down a queen. It's raw, it's messy, and it's beautiful. Grace's story taught me that true leadership isn't about title or power alone. It's about love, resilience, and the audacity to stand for what matters, even when the odds are stacked against you. Grace died around 1603, the same year as Elizabeth I. Tradition says she was buried at Clare Island Abbey, overlooking the sea she had ruled, the castles she had defended, and the lands she had reclaimed. And even now, walking among those ruins, feeling the Atlantic wind, I can feel her presence, the red-haired pirate queen whose beauty, courage and love left a mark that no tide can wash away. I like to think that when she walked her lands, she muttered the old Irish blessings. May the road rise to meet you, and the wind always be at your back. I like to imagine her clinking mugs with her men in the firelit halls, whispering, "We had a good crack today, Murroch, and may it ever be so." And I, reading her story, feel a deep soulful connection, survived because of her. And in that, the Pirate Queen and I share something timeless, the courage to face the storm, the love that drives us, and the sea that always calls us home. Now make sure you subscribe to the channel, it's free, and leave a comment or two down at the end for others to see.